What's about to happen to this woman would make many people give up instantly. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new stories. Lena had a dream: to become a lawyer and earn enough to give her parents a better life. They had always managed, even when money barely covered the basics. And now, they had mortgaged the house just so she could study at the National Law University of Camptown, one of the best in the country. That Monday morning, Lena stood in front of the university gate. It was huge, made of dark iron, with golden letters shining in the sun. It looked like something out of a movie. She took a deep breath. Her backpack was heavy, but not as heavy as the expectations she carried. She thought everything would be different there. She believed she would be respected, that she'd finally not be judged for her appearance. Law was about justice, right? About fighting for something bigger. Everyone there should have an open mind. But just a few steps in, she realized she was wrong. Whispers echoed through the entrance hall. No way, she's a student. Must be the security guard's daughter. That white, she looks like a vampire. She pretended not to hear. She had heard worse all her life. She crossed the hall trying to appear confident, but every stare clung to her like something was off. And in some way, that's how she'd been made to feel since childhood. She arrived at room 103, her first class, sat in the back, removed her sunglasses, and placed her books on the desk. The light in the room hurt her eyes, but she'd rather deal with that than be pointed at for wearing sunglasses indoors. Soon after, two students walked in. They stopped, looked her up and down, sneered, and sat far away. She pretended not to notice, as always. The professor entered right after. She was stern, elegant, with her hair in a tight bun. She started talking about the Constitution, about the role of law in society. Lena clung to those words. She wanted to believe that here would be different, that this would be a place of respect, that she would finally belong. But the illusion didn't last. The professor asked each student to introduce themselves briefly. One by one they spoke. Lena was one of the last. As she was about to speak, a guy at the front interrupted. "And you, what's your name? Those red eyes. Are you a vampire or a snow dog?" Laughter erupted. She stood up, didn't lower her head. "My name is Lena. I have albinism, and yes, my eyes are different. My vision is sensitive to light." The room fell silent, but it wasn't respect. It was that awkward silence, like she had said something absurd. The professor didn't comment, just called the next name on the list. Lena sat back down, pretending it hadn't hurt. During the break, everyone went down to chat, eat, make friends. Lena stayed in the room. She had no money for lunch and no food from home either. She laid her arms over the books and rested her head, pretending to nap. But in truth, she was trying not to fall apart. And there, alone, she remembered her childhood. People used to say she was adopted. The milkman's daughter, because she didn't look like her parents. She couldn't play in the sun with the others. "I have albinism," she'd say. But that only became another joke. Time passed, but the feeling of not belonging never did. While the professor lectured on citizenship and equality, Lena tried to stay focused. But it was hard. Hunger gnawed at her. Her head throbbed and her heart felt heavy. She thought of her parents, thought of home. She remembered the day her father came home early from work weeks ago, eyes downcast, saying he'd been laid off. No tears, just silence and a forced smile. "It happens, sweetheart. You just need to focus on college now." That same day, her mother decided to mortgage the house. "If it means seeing you succeed, it's worth every penny," she said, holding the papers with trembling hands. Lena didn't want to disappoint them, or herself. Even if everything was harder than she expected, she still believed it was worth the fight. Not just for college, but for what came after. For the dream, for dignity, for justice. She would go all the way. Suddenly the door opened. Some students walked in laughing. One looked at Lena and said, "Sleeping or summoning spirits with all that silence?" More laughter. She pretended not to hear. Packed her books and headed to the restroom. Locked herself in a stall and splashed her face with water. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the red eyes, almost transparent skin, white hair. She looked like a version of herself the world insisted on rejecting. She leaned closer to the mirror, firm, whispered, "They won't break me." She returned to class when the bell rang, sat in the back and stayed quiet, observing everything. The world that preached justice, law, and rights already showed that respect wasn't for everyone. Lena knew college would be hard, but now she realized it'd be worse than she imagined. Intelligence wouldn't be enough. She'd have to be strong all the time. Once again, she'd have to fight, but this time she would go all the way. The second week started much like the first. Lena arrived early again, backpack on her shoulders, cautious steps, and the same feeling of not belonging. She still wanted to believe it was just a rough beginning, that things would get better with time. But as soon as she entered the classroom, she realized she was wrong. No one replied to the quiet, "Good morning," she whispered. Groups were already formed, and she remained outside all of them. During class, the professor lectured about fundamental rights and equality. Lena listened, took notes, but part of her laughed inside. Not at the class, but at the irony. So much pretty theory, and no one there seemed to understand what real respect was. At the break again, she stayed in the room. Her stomach growled. The night before had been long and dinnerless. In the morning, she hadn't had the courage to ask her mom for breakfast, who looked more worried than usual about the bills. She pretended to be busy with her books, like they were more interesting than any conversation or food. She rested her arms on the desk and lowered her head just for a few minutes. Fell asleep without realizing it. When the bell rang for the next class, a few students came in laughing. One of them looked her way, raised his phone, and took a picture without her noticing. Later, during a break, she checked the class group chat on her phone. A notification popped up with the image. It was her asleep over her books. The caption read, "Sleeping again? Looks like an exhausted ghost." Her heart sank. She froze, staring at the screen as if it weren't real. The reactions, the comments. It was all real, and it hurt. She shoved her phone to the bottom of her backpack and took a deep breath. She wanted to scream, but didn't. She wanted to disappear, but stayed. As always, after the last class, Lena waited for the room to empty and approached the professor's desk. "Professor, sorry to bother you," she began, a little unsure. "I wanted to talk about something with a few classmates." "Go ahead," the professor replied, organizing her papers. "They isolate me, make jokes. They took a photo of me sleeping and posted it in the group." It was humiliating. The professor sighed, like she had expected this kind of complaint. "Lena, unfortunately, not everyone is kind. College is hard for everyone. My advice is to focus on your studies. You have potential. Don't get distracted by this sort of thing." Lena stood there for a second. The response hit like a cold shower. The professor zipped her bag and walked. Still holding her books, head heavy, an old memory came rushing back. It was from middle school, a school presentation. She was ready, rehearsed, but heard a classmate say, "Let the vampire read, she'll scare the teacher." She locked herself in the bathroom, cried silently, but still went on stage and read her piece. She got a high grade, but the pain stayed. It'd all be at the end of the day. After a long seminar, Lena returned to the classroom to put away her materials. When she opened her locker, she found something unexpected. A simple package, 2 ham sandwiches and a juice box. No note, no name. She looked around, confused. Only one student was in the corner, zipping up his backpack. He looked up briefly, met her gaze, gave a small nod, and walked away. Lena sat down, opened the package, and ate slowly, as if trying to absorb every detail of that moment. It was just a snack, but to her it meant everything. It wasn't just food, it was care. It was the first human gesture in days. On the way home, the world outside looked grayer than ever. The bus swayed slowly through the streets, and Lena stared out the window like she didn't belong anywhere. When she got home, she climbed the stairs and found her father sitting on the porch, holding an envelope. His gaze was distant. "Is everything okay?" she asked as she approached. He took a moment to answer, then handed her the paper. "It's from the bank. If we miss the first mortgage payment, the house goes straight to auction," Lena read, feeling the paper tremble in her hands. "But it'll work out, sweetheart," he said, trying to smile. "You're going to make it. And when that happens, all of this will have been worth it." She nodded slowly, unable to say anything. That night, she couldn't sleep. The silence in her room screamed. Everything that had once been just difficult now felt like it was about to collapse. And if no one stood for her, she would have to stand for herself. On Tuesday, the constitutional law class started late. The professor hadn't arrived yet, and students chatted loudly as if Lena weren't even there. As usual, she sat in her seat in the back. But this time, something different happened. A guy sat 2 rows ahead. She recognized him. He was the one who had left the sandwich in her locker. He didn't look at her directly or make any gestures, but just being there, near her, already drew attention from the others. Lena pretended not to notice, opened her notebook and started reviewing material from the last class. But inside, she was alert. It could have been coincidence, but it felt like more. Midway through class, the professor proposed a group activity. Students were to form trios and analyze a case. Lena looked around. No one called her. No one even looked at her. She began to get up to ask if she could join a nearby group, but was interrupted. "If you don't have a group, you can present alone later," said the professor, not even lifting her head. Lena sat back down, trying to hide the embarrassment. The room went on buzzing until a voice on the other side cut through the noise. "Better that way. Looks like a lab experiment anyway." Some laughed. Others didn't even try to hide it. Lena felt her face heat up. But this time, something inside her refused to stay quiet. She stood up. "What did you say?" Her voice came out steady. The guy pretended not to hear. "Say it again. I heard it. I just want to make sure." The room went silent. "You talking to me?" He shot back, smirking. "I am. Since you had the courage to mock me, have the courage to say it to my face." The room tensed. The professor finally looked up, but said nothing. Lena continued. "You all talk about justice, equality, rights, but act like you're above everything. I didn't ask to be here. I fought to be here. And if you can't handle someone who's different, that's not my problem. It's yours." Silence. She sat down again, without a smile, without trembling. Her heart raced, but a new kind of strength surged within her. A courage she didn't recognize, but that seemed born right in that moment. Class resumed. The professor went on like nothing had happened. But Lena noticed. Some weren't laughing anymore. Others looked uncomfortable. Not with her, but with what she had shown them. A mirror. At the end of class, as students filed out, the guy from earlier, the one who had left the food, approached with a book in hand. "Constitutional Law, Volume 2, he said, handing her the book. "It's full of notes. Might help." Lena took it, surprised. Looked at the worn cover, then at him. "Why are you doing this?" He shrugged. "Because no one should have to go through this alone." She almost handed it back just to protect herself, but couldn't. She was tired of building walls all the time. "What's your name?" "Noah." "Thank you, Noah." He simply nodded and walked away. No questions, no pressure. At the library, Lena sat by the window with the book. She flipped through the pages. They were filled with highlights, arrows, handwritten notes, carefully marked passages like someone had genuinely cared to understand, not just memorize. While reading, she thought about what had happened in class. She had never stood up for herself like that. Always swallowed it. Always smiled outside and bled inside. But today, in front of everyone, she answered, not out of pride, but exhaustion. She remembered something her mom always said, even when everything at home seemed to fall apart. When you carry the truth in your chest, you don't need to shout. You just need to keep going. And for the first time, Lena felt like she was starting to find out what her truth was. On the way home, The sky had started to darken. The streets of Camptown always looked the same, but that afternoon felt different, like each step was part of something she didn't yet understand. The book under her arm wasn't just study material. It was a symbol, a gesture, a sign that maybe, just maybe, not everyone was cruel. There were still bills. There was still silence at home, empty plates, and a mortgage heavier than any exam. But for the first time, Lena didn't just feel the weight. She felt something else, a kind of inner push, something whispering, "You didn't come this far to hide." Deep down, she knew worse days would come. They'd still try to tear her down, sabotage every step. But she also knew one more thing. Now that she had spoken, now that she had faced it head on, she couldn't go back to being who she was before. She wouldn't bow again. She would move forward, afraid, unsure, hungry even. But she would move. That Wednesday morning, the silence at home was as heavy as the bank's threat. The breakfast table was set like always, but there was no food. Just 2 glasses of water and 3 empty plates. Her father, head down, stirred an empty mug. Her mother kept her eyes fixed on the checkered tablecloth. "They called again yesterday," she muttered, "to remind us about the payment." "I know," her father replied, not looking up. Lena pretended not to hear, but her stomach dropped. Food was missing, yes, but what hurt more was her parents' faces. They had done everything, mortgaged the house, sold things, cut every expense, and still everything felt like it was hanging by a thread. The night before, she had heard them, arguing, her mother's voice cracking, her father saying he didn't know what else to do. Then silence, the kind that seeps into the walls. She left for college without eating. Just books and notebooks in her backpack. She passed the corner market with a tight chest, avoiding the shelves. The smell of fresh bread felt almost cruel. At the university, she faked normalcy, grabbed her materials, entered room 103, and sat down. When break came, she did what she always did. Waited for everyone to leave, rested her head on her arms, and pretended to study. But really, her body was too heavy. Her stomach was empty, her head pounding. The only thing fueling her now was pride, and even that felt like it was fading. Minutes later, she heard footsteps. Someone had come in. It was the cleaning lady. Lena had seen her before, but they'd never spoken. "You okay, sweetie?" the woman asked kindly. "Yeah. Just resting a bit. Class was tough today." The woman watched her for a few seconds, then opened the lunch bag she carried and pulled out a cheese sandwich wrapped in a napkin and a small cup of tea. "Want it? Made it this morning. It's a bit cold now, but it fills you up." You don't have to bother," Lena replied, unable to meet her eyes. "It's no bother, I'm offering." She hesitated, but hunger won. Took it carefully, thanked her in a whisper. The first bite brought both relief and shame. The woman sat in the chair beside her and stayed quiet. "What they do to you isn't right, you know. I see everything. I just stay quiet because, well, I get it." Lena looked at her, curious. The woman's eyes were calm, but tired, and also filled with a kind of strength Lena recognized from somewhere. "What's your name?" Lena asked. "Thumitu, thank you, Ruth, really. One day I'll tell you my story. For now, just eat. You're gonna go far, girl. You'll see." Lena didn't quite understand what she meant, but she memorized her name like it was a secret. It was just a cheese sandwich, but in that moment, it meant more than any speech. That afternoon in class, Noah showed up again. Sat nearby. She noticed he watched her with quiet concern without invading. "You okay?" he asked during the break. "It's a hard day, but I've had worse. Want to study together later?" Library's quieter at that hour. She thought about saying no, but she was tired of hiding, and he seemed safe. Like there was something good inside him, something different from the others. Sure. Later they met between rows of old books. Sat at a table in the back, far from the noise. Noah pulled out 2 books, opened his notebook, handed her an extra pen. They studied in silence for a while, until Lena unintentionally said, "A woman gave me food today. The cleaning lady." "Ruth?" Never seen anyone look at me with so much respect in a place like this. Noah stopped writing and looked at her with a faint smile. Ruth? I know her. She has more stories than any professor here. She's got a law degree too. What? Yeah. Graduated from the same university years ago, but she never got to work as a lawyer. No one wanted to be represented by a poor black woman who cleaned floors. Even with a diploma in hand, Lena couldn't speak. A chill ran down her spine, and she never gave up? Never. She said if she couldn't be a lawyer the way she dreamed, she'd clean the halls where other black folks could study one day. And look, Lena lowered her eyes. That sandwich came back to her memory, Ruth's firm gaze, the silent, nearly invisible presence that seemed to hold the entire building together. That wasn't just a gesture of kindness. It was a legacy, a kind of resistance that doesn't fit in textbooks. It was living history right in front of her. Then, Lena realized, she wasn't just studying law. She was the result of everything women like Ruth had planted, even when no one was watching. And in that moment, she made a silent promise. If I ever make it, it will be for all the ones who couldn't. That afternoon, under a humid sky, Lena walked decisively toward the service corridor. She waited until things quieted down and knocked on the small break room door where Ruth stayed between shifts. Ruth answered with a surprised smile. Hey, Lena. Everything all right? I wanted to ask you something. Do you still have your diploma? Ruth looked at her wary. I do. Why? Can I see it? Without another word, Ruth walked to a cabinet and pulled out a worn plastic folder. From it, she carefully removed an old envelope and, with great care, revealed the diploma. It was slightly yellowed with time, but it read, Bachelor of Law, Class of 1998. Lena read in silence, throat tight. Have you ever tried to go back to practicing? Ruth chuckled softly, but without joy. I tried, yeah. Knocked on law office doors, sent out resumes, interviewed. No one cared. A poor black cleaning woman with a 20-year-old law degree? They wouldn't even let me finish the sentence. After a while, I stopped trying. But that's not fair. Life isn't, but we carry on. Lena went back to class with that thought in her head. She sat at her desk, the diploma echoing in her memory. The class went on, but she could only think of how someone could spend years cleaning floors when they should be defending justice. That night, instead of going straight home, Lena went to the university's legal aid lab. It was a small space mostly used by upper-level students and scholarship holders. She asked a monitor if she could use a computer. He gave her a suspicious look, but allowed it. Lena spent hours researching. Degree revalidation, extension programs, social partnerships. She took notes on everything. Read forums, watched videos, studied the legal path that could give Ruth another chance, if someone believed in her. The next day, after class, she crossed the central courtyard and heard snickers. When she looked, a group of students was staring. Look, the savior of the people, one said. Gonna defend the cleaning lady now. Isn't looking like a ghost enough? Wants attention too? Another added, she just wants to stand out. Probably trying to get an extra scholarship. Lena swallowed hard. Her blood boiled, but she didn't answer. She walked into the library, hid between the bookshelves, and took a deep breath. She couldn't fall apart again. Later, after class, someone called her name. It was Professor Daniel, who taught administrative law. They'd barely exchanged greetings before. Lena, can I speak with you a moment? She assumed it was trouble, but stopped. Sure, Professor. I heard you were in the lab last night. Someone mentioned your interest in a case of professional exclusion, about a former student. Lena widened her eyes. I just want to help. She's amazing, and her degree is legitimate. She just never got a chance. The professor crossed his arms, thinking, the school has a dormant extension project. We lost funding, no one wanted to lead it, but maybe with a concrete proposal and a real case until we can bring it back. Lena couldn't believe what she was hearing. Really? I'll need help with paperwork. If you're willing, I can advise you. It'll be work. But we might make enough noise to open paths, not just for her, but for others too. The conversation was brief, But Lena left feeling a new kind of hope. For the first time, someone in the institution looked at her not as an exception or a problem, but as someone capable of making a difference. At home, her mother sat on the couch flipping through bills. "Any news today?" the mother asked. "I'm seeing if we can delay the bank payment. Your father got a delivery gig. We can buy some time." Lena walked over and hugged her from behind. "I know it's hard, but trust me, I'm making every sacrifice worth it." Her mother stroked her hand and said nothing. But in that silence, there was a trust no words could carry. In her room, Lena opened her notebook and started organizing everything she had researched. She divided pages by topic, listed contacts, printed laws and precedents. She was still just a student, still went hungry during breaks, still felt invisible in many classes. But that night, looking at the pile of notes forming a wall on her desk, Lena didn't feel small. She flipped the pages with her finger, marked the key points in red ink and gathered everything into a folder. Then she took a breath and looked in the mirror. In that tired reflection, she saw more than dark circles and messy hair. She saw someone who wouldn't ask permission to exist anymore. She picked up the folder, closed the notebook and murmured, to herself like a warning, "If they try to shut the next door, I'll come in through the window." The project was ready. It was simple, direct, but powerful. Offer free legal guidance to university workers, especially those who had never been able to fully exercise their rights. Ruth would be the pilot case, and also an informal consultant. The goal was twofold: to help her and to prove that life experience also counts as knowledge. On the morning of the proposal submission, Lena arrived early with her folder fully organized. Professor Daniel waited in the faculty room. He flipped through the documents carefully, nodding. "You took this seriously, Lena. Very well structured. I just thought, if no one opened a door for her, maybe we need to build a new entrance." He smiled, made a few technical notes with a pen, then signed the proposal and submitted it to the department board. Now we wait for the decision. But I'll say this: if this is approved, you'll have signed off on something bigger than you realize. The following week, campus chatter shifted tone. Some students whispered when Lena passed by. Others glared. One day, in the library courtyard, she overheard, "She wants to turn college into an NGO now? All in the name of inclusion." Poor cleaning lady, being used for social marketing. Lena took a deep breath and kept walking. She had already learned, the worst wasn't the yelling. It was the poison hidden in smiles and whispers. But things got worse on Friday when an anonymous Instagram page posted a photo of her talking to Ruth in a back hallway. The caption read, "Using poverty to look good is the new marketing." The post went viral among students. Mocking comments, accusations, jokes. Some said she just wanted a scholarship. Others claimed it was all staged. Lena locked her phone and tried to get through the day. When she entered room 103, she froze. On her desk, someone had scribbled with red marker, "You don't represent anyone. Go back to the sewer you came from." She stared at it for a few seconds. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She wiped it off with her sleeve, sat down, and opened her notebook. That night, Ruth showed up at the university gate, still in her work clothes, ID badge hanging from her neck. She went to the front desk and asked to speak to the coordinator. Soon after, Lena was called to the meeting. When she entered, Ruth stood holding a paper, her diploma, in both hands. "Excuse me," Ruth said firmly. "I know I'm not a student. I don't work here officially, but I want to speak. And I want you to listen." Everyone fell silent. "They're saying Lena's using me, that she wants attention. Well, I'm here to say that's not true. She's the first person in years to see me as capable of being heard, of being remembered." She held out her diploma. "I graduated in law, worked as a receptionist for 2 years, then in an office. When I was laid off, I tried again. Sent resumes, knocked on doors. No one called. One day I took a cleaning job because I needed to survive. But I never stopped being a lawyer. People just stopped letting me be one." Lena stood still, throat tight. Again, but for different reasons. Ruth took a breath and concluded, "If this project will help others like me, then let it start with me. And if this is called virtue signaling, like they say, then come and signal me all you want, because I accept." Head held high. The professors looked at each other, some visibly moved. Professor Daniel broke the silence. "Thank you, Ruth. What you said was more powerful than any law article." Lena felt something shift, like a curtain had been pulled, revealing not just truth, but strength no one had expected. Later, walking down the quiet hallway together, Lena turned to Ruth. "You didn't have to do that. I did it because I wanted to, and because no one else would." They stopped in front of the alumni wall. Lena looked at the old graduation pictures. No faces like Ruth's, none like hers. "They'll still try to silence us," Lena said. "They will. But now they know we speak," Ruth replied, smiling. Lena clutched her books to her chest and looked down the corridor. She was already thinking about what came next, and she wasn't going to back down. The university's official page published the news with a discreet title: "Student proposes legal outreach project with department support." The photo showed Lena next to Professor Daniel, both with serious expressions. There was no hype, no chairs. But it was enough for some gazes in the hallways to shift. At the library cafe, two students who had never spoken to Lena asked for more details about the project. A professor from the 5th semester sent an email congratulating her initiative. Ruth, meanwhile, carried herself differently. Her eyes smiled. Not just for her, but as if her voice had finally echoed inside those walls. On Wednesday, the program coordinator knocked on room 103's door and called Lena into the hallway. "We have an internal seminar on human rights next week. I want you to present the project. Can you?" She froze. "Present. Me. You started it all. Your voice should lead. There'll be professors, guests, even a few people from the public defender's office. You in?" She hesitated. Fear, yes, but also pride. "I'm in." The days passed quickly and sleep didn't come easy. Lena practiced at night in front of the mirror, in front of her phone camera, surrounded by silent piles of books. She tried to steady her trembling hands. Every time she froze, she remembered Ruth's words. On Friday, 2 days before the seminar, Lena went to Ruth's home. They took the laptop to the kitchen table and went over talking points, data, and arguments. Talk to them like you talk to me, girl. No need to sound like a walking dictionary. "Speak from the heart," Ruth said, stirring her coffee. Sunday arrived. The auditorium was bigger than Lena imagined. Dark seats, soft lighting above, a long table with microphones in front. She arrived early, tested the slides, reviewed her notes, and waited as the room filled. Soon the seats were occupied. Professors, students, staff. Then they came, the familiar faces. The ones who laughed, the ones who pointed. One sat in the 3rd row and said loud enough to echo, "Ready to show off, Snowdoll?" Some laughed. Others pretended not to hear. Lena gripped her notebook and breathed deeply. When her name was called, her heartbeat raced out of rhythm. She walked to the microphone, the warm light on her face, the screen glowing behind her. The silence was thick. She opened her notebook. "Good afternoon. My name is Lena," and pause. The words stuck. Dry mouth. A second felt eternal. Someone cleared their throat, others whispered. Lena felt her face flush. Then a familiar voice broke the silence. "We want to hear you, Lena." She looked. It was Professor Helena. The same strict one from the first day. The one who never seemed to see beyond the syllabus. Now she looked at Lena firmly, as if saying, "Go on," and Lena did. She spoke about the project, about Ruth, about lack of access, institutional prejudice. She quoted statistics, laws, and real cases, not like someone repeating memorized lines, but like someone who had lived them. The auditorium grew quiet. Tension turned into attention. In the end, there was no standing ovation, no explosion of applause, but there were eyes that didn't look away. There was a respect that can't be asked for. Afterward, as she gathered her things, Professor Helena approached. When I saw your name on the list of speakers, I didn't expect much. But you surprised me, and that's rare." Lena simply nodded, her legs still shaking. Outside, she sat for a few minutes on the stone steps of Building C. The wind was dry. She pulled out her sunglasses but didn't put them on. For the first time, she didn't need to hide. Those minutes alone said more than any applause. When she stood up, the same classmate who mocked her in the seminar passed with two friends. He avoided eye contact. Later at home, her father noticed her lighter expression. "Something happen?" he asked. Lena smiled and answered as she arranged her books. "Yeah, something did. But today, it wasn't their voice that spoke the loudest, it was mine." On Monday, room 103 was already full before the bell rang. Lena walked in with her books clutched to her chest, trying to go unnoticed. But that was impossible. After the seminar, her name was everywhere. And not all attention was welcome. Some classmates came up to ask about the project, praised her courage. But others, the whisperers, the eye-rollers, the smug smirks, made it clear it wasn't what she said that bothered them. It was who she was. During the break, Ruth approached with a more serious expression than usual. "Professor Daniel called me. Word is they're questioning your place in the project. A student from the 7th semester filed a complaint. Said, it's unethical for a second semester student to coordinate something like this." Lena swallowed hard. "But it's my project. I started it. Alone." "I know, and so does he. But there's pressure building behind closed doors. People trying to delegitimize everything like it's personal." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Her head spun with one question. How far could she go before they tried to pull it all down? On Tuesday, she went straight to the coordinator's office, waited in the hallway until Professor Daniel showed up, arms full of folders, tired eyes. "I've heard the murmurs," he said before she could even speak. "It's complicated. Some senior students are questioning the structure of the project. They say there wasn't a formal selection process. Since when does a social idea need a call for proposals to exist?" She shot back. He made a small hand gesture as if trying to calm a fire. "I'm on your side, Lena. But universities are political places, and sometimes merit isn't enough. What you did drew attention. That bothers people." She walked out of his office with a tight throat, skipped the cafeteria, no appetite, climbed the stairs to the rooftop and sat near the edge. The wind was sharp, but better than the heat of gossip. She stayed there until her next class. In the silence, she thought of her mother, of how she used to say, "When a poor woman walks through a door no one expected, the sound of her heels bothers more than any protest." That afternoon in criminal law, a girl sitting beside her leaned in. "Your seminar hit hard. You said things no one wants to admit in here." Lena was surprised. It was the first time Louisa, that girl, ever spoke to her. "You say it like it's a bad thing," Lena replied. "No, just saying. You'll take more hits. But if you endure it, some people will listen. And that's worth something." Louisa turned back to the lecture. Lena sat there wondering how many were listening, even in silence. Later, in the old building's corridor, Lena saw a vandalized poster on the wall. It was the seminar flyer, with her face front and center. Someone had scrawled in red, "Academic Victim Complex," and below, "Want to change the world? Try studying more, talking less." She tore the paper down, folded it neatly, tucked it into her folder. That night, her dad came home with his lunchbox untouched. He had been laid off that morning. Said, "They're downsizing. No more room for me." The news hit like a punch. The house was mortgaged. Tuition had barely been paid. "What about next month?" Her mom sat in silence on the couch. No tears, just staring at the floor like trying to find a plan where there was no way out. Lena locked herself in her room, opened her books, tried to study, but nothing went in. Her mind only thought of numbers, bills, fear. And in the middle of it all, the image of the vandalized poster flashed back, like a reminder. Even when you do everything right, the world finds a way to put you back in your place. But she didn't want to go back, not after coming this far. The next day in class, no one noticed the new dark circles or her worn-out shirt. What she carried inside, only she knew. In the back of the room, she opened her notebook and wrote on a loose sheet, "If your very existence is a threat, then existing is already resistance." It wasn't a promise. It was more like a reminder. Because right now, that was all she had to hold on to. On Thursday, the clock showed 5:36 p.m. when Lena returned to the community center. The place, usually buzzing with projects and workshops, was quiet. Lights off, chairs stacked in the corner. Only one room in the back was open. Inside, a few people spoke in low voices. Ruth sat beside a man with a shaved head and a light blue dress shirt. He looked out of place in that environment. When he saw Lena, he smiled slightly and nodded. The man stood up and held out his hand. "You must be Lena." "The student who created the project?" he asked, calm but firm. "That's me," she replied, not quite sure what to expect. "I'm Andre Gomes, public defender. Ruth told me about you." Lena wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning, so she stayed quiet. "I saw your presentation, and the university's reaction. You touched a deep wound. That has a cost." She nodded slightly. "What I said wasn't just about me. It was about people who never even get to step onto a campus." Andre studied her for a moment. "That's exactly why we need to keep going, but with structure. Ruth and I are building a legal guidance center here at the community center. We need someone who knows the ground, who knows how to listen, who doesn't think a diploma is a shield." Lena's eyes widened. "You want me to? I want you to come, observe, learn, then act. It'll be tough, no glamour, no applause. But it will matter." She looked at Ruth, who nodded with a quiet smile. "But if you want to think it over, I understand," Andre added. "I don't need to think. I'm in," Lena replied without hesitation. It was the first time someone saw her as part of the solution, not the problem. That night, she got home to find her mother stretching dinner with what was left in the fridge. "A bit of rice, 2 eggs, and a carrot." "I'm not hungry, Mom. I'll skip dinner," she lied. Her stomach had been growling for hours, but watching her mother cut the carrot into tiny pieces, as if feeding an army, hurt more than hunger. She went to her room, changed clothes, and sat on the floor with her notebook. The community center notes were there. It was real. Starting next week, she'd be involved, hands-on, with the kind of everyday problems the law often ignored. But the next day brought another blow. After her general theory class, a course coordinator pulled her aside in the hallway. "Lena, there's been a complaint. They say you're using the university's name to promote outside activities, without formal authorization." She frowned. "I'm just volunteering at a community center." "I know, but someone claims you're representing the university without official approval. It's caused some discomfort." Lena stayed quiet. Another attempt to delegitimize her. Another way of saying, "Your place is silence. We're reviewing the situation. I just wanted to let you know before it becomes formal." The woman turned and left, like delivering a cold memo. Lena stood there, the warning echoing in her mind. With every step forward, someone tried to drag her back. Later, Ruth sent a message. "Heard about the warning. If you want to step back, I understand. But if you want to keep going, we won't let you do it alone." She didn't reply right away, just stared at the screen for a while. Then another notification came in. A voice message from an unknown number. "Hey, this is Camilla, from 6th semester. I saw the torn flyer on the bulletin board. I also heard what they're saying about you in the office. I just wanted to say, some of us see you. And if you keep this project going, I want in." Her voice trembled, like she was pushing through a barrier just to speak those words. Lena replayed the message more than once. She didn't answer in words. She opened her notebook, jotted down a few names, and began what would become a real team. Independent, connected by something more than theory. Purpose. That Friday, she returned to the community center and found the room more crowded than before. Andre introduced the first cases: evicted families, abused women, elderly folks lost in bureaucracies. No one solves anything alone here, and no one has to prove they deserve to be here. We all learn together, he said before starting. Lena listened silently, then grabbed her notepad and started writing, eyes locked on the stories, heart steady. As she left with Ruth, the sun setting, outside she realized something. This wasn't just a learning space anymore. It was where, finally, she began to belong to something bigger than the walls built around her. The week began with Lena at the same table in the legal center, reviewing documents for a sensitive case. It was about a 73-year-old woman evicted from a room she'd occupied for over 20 years. The new landlord claimed it was irregular, but neither justice nor dignity seemed to see that woman. Lena looked over the papers, wondering where, between the rigid lines of law, the human side could fit. "You won't find this in your law books," Andre said, pulling up a chair beside her. "But this is what decides if you'll be a lawyer on paper or a lawyer for people." She gave a small nod and returned to the file. On Tuesday, when she arrived on campus, she saw a group laughing near the main bulletin board. From a distance, she noticed her own photo posted there, with a grotesque title, "Hero of Herself," now offering free justice for likes. Below, a caption mocked the community project, suggesting it was just a publicity stunt, no signature. But the smirks around the board made the authorship obvious. She tore the poster down without saying a word, folded it, slipped it into her backpack, walked past the crowd and into the library like it was just another Tuesday. Inside, Ruth waited, for her with 2 cups of instant coffee. The smell was stronger than the taste. "I saw the poster, you okay?" Lena took a breath before replying. "I don't know if I'm tired or just sick of seeing the same thing over and over. The project's growing. That makes people nervous when they think I'm just trying to show off. Because you dared to occupy a space they think isn't yours." Later, Andre arrived, visibly upset. He dropped his backpack on the table. "They called me into the department office. Said they're concerned about the institutional limits of unsupervised student involvement in external actions." A pretty way of saying, "Back off." Lena stayed silent. "They want me to ask you to take a break, said your project might blur the lines between activism and academic formation. Are you going to do it?" she asked. "No, but I have." To ask, "Can you handle this?" Lena didn't answer right away. She looked around. The nearly empty library felt colder under that kind of conversation. "I'm not doing this for extra credit or applause, but people are counting on this space. I can't turn my back now." Andre stared at her for a few seconds and finally said, "That's all I needed to hear." On Thursday, Ruth showed up looking tired. "I know you're strong, but maybe take a break. Just a week. Let the noise die down." Lena gave a faint smile. "Ruth, if I stop now, it'll look like they won. Worse, like I agree with what they're saying." That afternoon, after her criminal procedure class, a professor Lena barely knew called her into the hallway. It was Marcelo, known for his harsh opinions and rants about merit and tradition. They'd never spoken before. "I heard about the drama, the poster, the meetings." She kept a neutral face, expecting criticism. "I don't agree with half of what you say, but I admire the courage with which you say it. That's rare here." He pulled an envelope from his folder and handed it to her. "This is for you." "What is it?" "A letter of recommendation, and your registration for a national conference on community legal practices. Use it if you want, or throw it away. But know this, even when you think no one's watching, someone is." She held the envelope like it might vanish. Marcelo turned and walked away without waiting for thanks. On the way home, the sky was heavy but didn't rain. The envelope stayed at the bottom of her backpack, along with the torn poster. At home, her father sat silently on the couch, the weight of unemployment still thick in the room. Her mother tried to sew something under a dim light. In her bedroom, Lena turned on her lamp and took the envelope out. She opened it slowly, read the words like she couldn't believe they were written for her. At the end, one sentence stood out in bold. Courage without purpose is noise. But courage with direction is change. She closed her eyes for a moment, resting her head against the wall. Maybe not everything was against her. Maybe what she was building wasn't just resistance. It was a path. Years had passed since that silent university hallway, since the defaced posters, the days she napped hungry on top of her books. Now, the setting was different, but Lena never forgot where she came from. That night, the National Law University, the Camptown Auditorium was packed. Not for just any event. It was the national ceremony honoring the most impactful contributions to civil rights in the country. And standing under lights that no longer hurt her eyes, Lena Martins was being awarded the highest honor in Brazilian legal advocacy. The crowd stood and applauded. But Lena breathed calmly. The woman walking onto the stage wasn't dazzled by applause. She knew the real achievement wasn't public recognition. It was surviving the silences, the exclusions, the eyes that once said, "You don't belong here." She stood before the microphone, adjusted her notes, but spoke from memory. "When I first walked into this university, I thought I'd be met with respect. I believed that if everyone here was fighting for law, they were also fighting for justice. I was wrong." Pause. The room held its breath. The truth is, many people believe that only a few have the right to speak up for what's right. And the rest of us should just be thankful for being allowed in. When I tried to speak, they tried to silence me. When I started to rise, they tried to shrink me. But what no one noticed is that, even tired, I kept going. She looked ahead and continued, "I'm not here today as a symbol of overcoming. I'm here as proof that resisting is a form of existing, that occupying space is also justice." The applause returned. No tears in Lena's eyes. She had cried too much when no one was watching. Later, she went home alone, swapped heels for slippers, hung her blazer behind the door. Her apartment was small but organized. Books everywhere, family photos, newspaper clippings, sticky notes, with hearing reminders. And on one shelf corner, a single golden frame, the certificate declaring the mortgage paid off. She ran her hand over the wood of her desk, smiled, remembering her father, now working as a private driver, her mother, who embroidered custom pieces and helped at the new community center. In the center of the living room was a box. Inside were the first pamphlets of the legal project she founded right after graduating. "Justice Alive, legal guidance for those who've always been left out by the law," the slogan read. Not because they broke the law, but because they were never embraced by it. In the kitchen, she made tea. While the water boiled, she opened her laptop and finished an article for an international magazine. Justice for whom? When the system decides who deserves it. She ended the piece with a sentence she had once scribbled in a notebook back at the community center. "It was never about proving who I was. It was about never again letting others decide that for me." Sometimes, she still feared losing it all, feared they'd try to erase her again. But all it took was stepping outside and seeing the line of women waiting for legal assistance at the center she helped build to remember. This wasn't just about her. It was about all of them. Lena became the country's most respected lawyer, and now she defends the rights of those who never had any. If you were moved by today's story, leave a like and tell us your story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next.